Welcome in, everybody. Let's dive right into it. Now, there are a ton of fantasy and adventure-style stories and sagas that I and millions of others claim to have as our favorites. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, The Witcher, Hellboy, all that good jazz. It's great. And while the stories are fantastic, do they absolutely need their magical elements in order to be told? Like, if you took magic out of all those stories, could you still get the same plot, the same characters? I mean, right off the bat, you might be like, well, yes. Especially with stories like Harry Potter. They do need magic in order to be the same kind of story. Although the question for me then becomes, does the inclusion of magic make the story writing a little lazy? Or is the story then becoming far too dependent on magic? Does it make from getting from point A to points B and C almost too easy for the writer? Not for the characters, not for the story, but for the author. And if so, does the audience lose out on some potentially great storytelling? Well, let's work through it. A great comparison to be made would be for me to put two of the most well-known franchises ever up against each other. The original story of Star Wars, the very first Star Wars, A New Hope, although back in 1977 it was just Star Wars, right? And the likes of Harry Potter. Now, both stories are pretty similar. They're both about a plucky young man who grows up with his aunt and uncle. They're harboring secrets about the boy's parentage until he is whisked away by a wizened mentor character who takes him on an adventure to discover his true potential, which he won't fully realize until he meets a wiser, more powerful mentor later on. And along the way, he meets his two best friends, a scruffy, lackadaisical, wisecracking comic relief guy, and a spitfire, go-getter, headstrong, really smart girl, who will have some slight sexual tension with the main character until she ends up with the comic relief guy. And in both stories, they go up against a dangerous Dark Lord who's got tons of supremacist soldiers under his command, and local governments are incredibly afraid of him. Okay, so they're the same in a lot of regards. Star Wars and Harry Potter. Star Wars being far more sci-fi, geek myth, spaghetti western, samurai movie influenced, and then Harry Potter being more fantasy based. It's set in the real world, modern day era. It's very whimsical. It's much more younger audience geared, right? But which would we say is the superior story? And for the sake of our earlier questions, let's say that for this instance, superior means what I think are the two most important factors here. More effort in creative and thought-provoking writing, and more compelling villains. Let's just go with those qualifiers for now to get us to our answers. And these will inform whether or not magic is lazy. Because on the one hand, you have a franchise that is steeped in magic, and on the other you have one that is steeped in pseudoscience. But like we just illustrated, they are incredibly similar stories. So let's go down both paths for a hot second. See which ones have the better writing, see which ones have the better villain characters, and that will decide whether or not magic is lazy. Okay. So, what do we want out of our story writing? What does that look like? How do we gauge the effort put into writing a story? Well, I think broad questions like these aren't do justice with pinpoint answers, and I doubt that they would give us an exact answer as we might like if we just try and hit it with a really short, precise answer. Because you're trying to pin down a really big question with a needlepoint answer. It's going to be messy, and it's going to take a lot of tangents and explanations. So I think to answer that question, we'll probably have to look at things like popularity. How much buzz and conversation is being had about it? Are its tertiary interests selling? Things like merchandise, toys, clothing, accessories. Is that flying off the shelves? Is the cosplay community really into it? Does it have a documentary or two? An exclusive BTS, behind the scenes? Are the actors and directors being hounded to appear in interviews, go on morning talk shows? All of these are indicators that people really love the project. And if there's anything to be said about fanatical nerds who obsess over details and lore and the making of things, it's that we love and need immaculate writing. So, in essence, if something is becoming that popular, where all of those things are happening, we've probably got some indicators of something that is really well written. You can look at anything else and kind of see the proof in the pudding, right? The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, Quentin Tarantino films, Dragon Ball Z that's been around forever. You can look at anything that people constantly obsess over and dig into its writing a bit. I can guarantee you, if it's not amazing, there are nuggets of greatness in there that are timeless, they're relatable, and it gets the job done. I guarantee it. Conversely, if something is, let's say, the biggest project ever, but the writing is awful, if it's skewed and confusing, directionless and lackluster, if it doesn't keep that audience's attention, then it's poor writing. That's how we gauge effort. The results. You don't magically have muscles, right? You've got to put in a ton of work and effort. It's the same with quality writing. Trash writing is not bringing people in. And when the studios try to make use of different strategies and tactics to kind of cover up for their project's terrible writing, whether it be heavy marketing or even shaming fans, like the people at Disney Lucasfilm do, the general public and the hyper fans especially, they're smart enough to recognize what these studios are doing. So the desired effect will actually be inverted. You'll not only lose audience members, you will avidly create voices against you and your project. It's just what happened to Disney Lucasfilm with The Acolyte. And 5, 6, 7 other projects that they've made over the past 10 years. Now, all of this is in effort to cover up terrible writing. And if there's any allusion to what we have as examples of shows with bad writing, like I said, The Acolyte, Halo, Wheel of Time, Rings of Power, it's just really impressive with how bad the writing is. And the proof, like I said, is in the interest. It's in the buzz. It's in the merch sales. It's in, are there analyses being done on this? Are there YouTube channels being caught up in conversation about these projects? If the answer is no, if external nerd communities are not rallying around a project, then it's got bad writing. I promise you. So, Star Wars and Harry Potter. Do they both have great writing? Absolutely. They both tick off all the boxes. Is there any amount of laziness in the writing? I would say no, especially as these stories have an absolute ocean of lore and detail and carefully constructed stories that explain everything that needs to be explained. The difference between, say, the magic and the pseudoscience in science fiction is that magic just kind of happens. It might have some whimsical or mysterious origin story or reason for being, but it just is in most cases. Pseudoscience has a lot more work to do, a lot more legwork here. It mostly derives from actual science, and it'll build on that from there, or it's entirely based on some theoretical supposition that has no real tangible science behind it, or it builds off of a mythos or a conspiracy. So there's often a lot more explanation and detail seen in science fiction than there is in fantasy. But does that make Harry Potter lazier than Star Wars? I mean, just strictly in terms of its effort in its writing. I would say no, because J.K. Rowling understood what makes the story compelling. What makes any story compelling is not the magic, it's not the pseudoscience, it's not any of that brings us in and keeps us enthralled. It's the relationships, the themes, the major events, and the goings-ons that have the highest stakes for the characters that we grow to love and follow along their journeys with, as they go off to parts unknown. They have to run and duck from a galactic empire, or they have to scavenge a country in order to defeat a dark wizard. They have to go off to a swamp planet to become a Jedi. Those are the things that lead into the creating of something great, of great writing, is some really high stakes situations. Now, science fiction and fantasy are, at the end of the day, just backdrops for our stories to play out against. They are the lens through which these compelling aspects are relayed to us, the audience. But let's talk compelling villains here for a minute. Because my God, do I love me a dastardly evil villain. And good old HP and Star Wars have some of the most recognizable modern villains ever. Though, a question I would put forward is, when the general public thinks the words Dark Lord, I think Star Wars probably has Harry Potter beat here, with thinking Darth Vader and Sidious. We don't really think of Voldemort as being the Dark Lord of... Well, what is he really the Dark Lord of, exactly? A cult group of pure-blood supremacist wizards? I mean, come on. There's no castle, there's no underground fortress, no domain of evil. He doesn't even take over a damn school. And this is the Dark Lord we're supposed to think of? I don't think so. So, I have to give the tip in the scale to Star Wars here. Let's do a little bit more contrast here, and throw these villains against each other. I mean, this has been done 1,000 times already, so it's real easy, and we could just kind of breeze through it. But Vader is a much more massive and scary kind of a villain. He could just pop up anywhere, and we lost. Day's done. We're done for. I mean, he's a cyborg, a samurai. He uses invisible powers without having to move his hands or cast a spell. He has armies and giant machines of war and a navy. He's got devastating weapons at his command, and he can conquer a galaxy. And he's got these psychologically terrifying aspects to him as well. His face mask is this black helmeted skeleton face, and he's got this constant rebreather going on, adding in that very monotone, scary factor. If you're just around that, I imagine you would be kind of put off and maybe even a little terrified. I mean, he's like a force of nature that's just pure, blunt force evil. I mean, that's who I'm afraid of. And then we have Voldemort. And Voldemort's... the biggest thing he's probably got going for him is that he is smart. Okay, he does things like split his soul up, so if he gets killed, he can incarnate somewhere else, which is not a bad trick if you're going to, I don't know, take on the entire world's wizard community. He recruits monsters and evil wizards. He uses terrorist methods of instilling fear and capitulation. But, I mean, even in the books, he doesn't come close to winning. I mean, Voldemort barely took over half a country. He couldn't even topple a school full of kids and teachers. Could you imagine if he made it to America? I mean, it just sent a group of Navy SEALs with a couple of sniper teams, and that's all she wrote. It's done. Now, if you send Vader in there, into Hogwarts with his stormtrooper corps and a bunch of TIE fighters, the place is glass. I mean, he's gonna raid it, loot everything. He's gonna kidnap all the youngest wizard kids for the Emperor's experiments. And that's another thing Star Wars has going for it. Its real main villain, Darth Sidious. I mean, he stays cloaked in the shadows like this classic Golden Age monster movie. He's he's puppeteering all the players in the background, pulling the strings and manipulating his enemies. He lets them think that they're winning until it's too late, which is gold villain move. I mean, that is a pro villain move. That is who I am afraid of. By contrast, Voldemort is not really that scary. I mean, he's basically just a dark Jedi, or he's got some Night Sister witches with him. I'm not scared of that guy. He can't shoot me with lightning. But he shoots he uses the Avada Kedavra instant death kills, but instant death. I'll take instant death. Sure, that's way less scary than being shot and cooked alive with lightning. So yeah, I'll take Avada Kedavra over Force Lightning and a Shakespearean diatribe villain speech. It's any day. Now, do both Star Wars and Harry Potter have memorable villains? Yes. But Star Wars just has better memorable villains. It's also aided by the fact that the main story revolves around the villains as central characters from the beginning. Whereas in Harry Potter, Voldemort's presence is felt in the beginning, but he's not a real character until the Goblet of Fire. Vader's there from the jump. The Empire is there from the jump. Like, we're running from and dodging and getting away from stormtroopers and Imperial forces the entire trilogy. Though, again, both villains are directly tied to our main leads, Harry, Luke, Leia. So both stories are about those connections and those relationships. They're both coming-of-age stories in different ways. Star Wars just does it better. It does everything better. But is that because magic is a lazy story writer's tool? Because it's real easy to explain away inconsistencies or inconveniences, or to get us from point A to Z with the snap of a few fingers? Need to bring somebody back to life? Alright, we'll come in with some last-minute quote-unquote old magic bullshit that has some emotional tie-in to it to lend it a little bit of weight. Now, you can do some wild stuff with the Force, no doubt, but not everybody has the ability to wield the Force. I mean, there's people in Star Wars Galaxy that doesn't even know about it. And even the ones that can use it, they don't instinctively know they can use it. And when they find out, or they're taught how, it takes a ton of training and effort to wield it effectively. Luke, for example, he can wield the Force, but he can't use it the same way Vader or Sidious can. He can use it to enhance his physical abilities to a point, or to hone his senses and his insights, even to mentally call out to his twin sister. But he can't shoot Force lightning. He can't repel the Emperor. He can't deflect the objects that Vader's tossing at him. I mean, he's not immediately all-powerful. But with magic, all you really need to know is what the spells are, and you have to have the will to use them. That is basically it. Magic from the Harry Potter world is basically the same as a Green Lantern's ring. I mean, you could basically do anything as long as you have a strong enough will to follow through with it. So, I think what we can conclude is that the use of magic can make a story lazy. It can cheapen some events or stunt some character developments. It can make for less consequences. As opposed to science fiction, where it's hardly the case that you can accomplish what you can with magic as easily or as simply. And because of that fact, I think magic is not nearly as superior as the pseudoscience that we have in science fiction. And while it may not make the story that uses it lazy, I believe that it can take away from its potential. But that is all I have for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning back in, and stick around for more Sci-Fi Unchained. But for now, live long and prosper, my friends, and may the Force be with us all.